Hello and welcome to the Endometriosis and Mindful Practical Cycle Awareness webinar. My name is Sophie Kelly and I am the Volunteer Coordinator for Endometriosis UK. And we are pleased to be joined today by our guest speaker, Kate Shepherd-Cohen, who will be introducing herself in a bit more detail in just a moment. Before I hand over, I would like to remind viewers that this webinar is an hour long and there will be a Q&A section at the end where Kate will be answering some live and some pre-submitted questions. For any individual medical guidance, please do reach out to your healthcare provider. So without further ado, Kate, I shall pass over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Sophie. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this will work. How's that?
We can see that.
Can you see it?
Yes, we can
Great.
see that.
Wonderful. And I'm just going to check I can go through it. Okay, wonderful. Okay, we're on. So today we're going to go on a bit of a journey through the menstrual cycle. And through this, I'm going to be teaching a really practical, super simple daily practice that is known as menstrual cycle awareness. Now, this is a mindful practice, and it helps us to really ground ourselves in our menstrual cycle, to begin to rely on our menstrual cycle almost as a friend that is there to support us, and then find ways to work with it through family life, friendships, and even through our pain that we might be experiencing or any other symptoms. So first things first, I just want to acknowledge, I'm just going to see if I can move myself down here. I just want to, is that okay, Sophie?
Yeah, I think the webinar screen has just frozen there. You might have to just come out of the PowerPoint and restart it if that's okay.
Yeah.
No worries.
How's
there
that?
we go.
Are we back in? Excellent.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, as I say, today we're going to go on a bit of a journey, metaphorically speaking. And I want to imagine us, about all of us here today, we're about to go on this journey together. So first of all, just to acknowledge how far we've actually all come just to be here today. In our own journeys, in our cycles, from when we've started our periods to all of the information that we have been given or not given and collected along the way. So just to really acknowledge yourself and each of us for all being here on this journey that we're about to go on today. And also just, of course, that we're all bringing our own experiences here. So if you hear something that I say today and you think, well, actually, I experienced something different, it's welcome. You know, all of us are welcome here, just like if we were all about to go on a big hike together, we're all welcome. Whatever experience we bring is welcome, and to share it, and to anything that I share with you that doesn't feel like it fits, just use it as a way to compare and contrast. It doesn't mean that what you bring is in any way wrong or not normal. And through that, of course, there's the respecting the differences of each and every single one of us. I would say here, I haven't put it on this list, but you may have been on this particular journey before. You may have already come across menstrual cycle awareness as a practice. You may have your own way of acknowledging your menstrual cycle or tracking it, and that's okay. That's welcome. Just like if you had done a walk before, let's just experience it again. And I think we cannot hear this enough times. So bring a beginner's mind to it, but your experience is welcome too. So we're here to support one another. And that is one of the most beautiful things about menstrual cycle awareness. It gives us an opportunity of really deeply understanding where we are in our own menstrual cycle and giving us the language to share it with others so that we can support one another. And as we all know, with the menstrual cycle, that we can absolutely expect ups and downs, twists and turns, highs and lows. I'm not anticipating any lows in this particular webinar, but of course I'm describing the menstrual cycle journey itself. We know that it brings this, so that is just like any other big adventure. It brings with it those highs and the lows. That's actually the beauty of it in some ways, although I know it's very hard to witness the beauty, isn't it, when we're in a particularly low place. So I am on this journey with you. I didn't want to say I'm going to guide you in a way, because I really don't believe in the culture of the expert in this work. We are all empowered with our own experience and our own, what we consider to be our own normal or our own typical. So I'm here with you on the adventure. I was really lost, to continue that metaphor, with my own cycle. It really was disrupting my life in so many different ways. I didn't have the words to describe what I needed. Honestly, I was really quite confused with the science side of it. You know, if I tried to understand what was going on through looking at the reproductive biology or the neuroscience, so we're starting to talk about hormones. We hear a lot more now about hormones, don't we, on social media in particular, and I found that quite baffling in terms of what was relatable to my own experience. So it didn't necessarily help me. It didn't give me the information I needed to make me feel less lost with it and less isolated, less alone, and the suffering that just comes with that in itself. I definitely felt dismissed by doctors. In fact, even now, if I go to the doctor, sometimes I can come away feeling quite dismissed, even with the language, but at least I'm empowered with my own practice. So I was really fed up with the state of menstrual health and education and the mainstream. And I came across this practice, which was created by Alexandra Pope and Shani Hugo Wurlitzer at the Red School. So if you would like to find out any more about this practice from the root teachers, you can go to their website, redschool.net. And they also have some free courses you can do, and they have a book. I learned this practice of menstrual cycle awareness, and I just thought to myself, this needs to be what you receive when you go to see any healthcare professional, especially if you're a young person, but actually at any age over the life course, from your first period right up to menopause. And so why don't our doctors know it? It took me on a journey of creating a course and creating an organization called Menstrual Cycle Support, and two courses in menstrual cycle awareness, one for teenagers and one for adults, an online course that I wanted to make free for users that could be available on referral when you went to see a healthcare professional. And it is now available in over 500 GP surgeries across the UK on social prescription. Social prescription's a brilliant pathway for this. It's essentially saying it's a non-medical, so it's not pharmaceutical products. It's something that you can be referred to. Importantly, you don't have to go to your healthcare professional, so anybody can just sign up anytime, and that's through my organization, Menstrual Cycle Support. And today I'm going to be talking through some of the things that are in those courses, but I wanted to sort of share with you a little bit about what has brought me here. And let you know that that is a resource that you can access at any time. And if you want to learn more after this webinar. So menstrual cycle awareness, to continue with our metaphor of the journey, really became a compass for me. It really became a way of orienting myself in the cycle, of trying to figure out where I was when I felt so lost. It gave me such a guidance. And, you know, we wouldn't go off without a compass if we were about to go on a big journey together. And so MCA, when I say MCA, I'm talking about menstrual cycle awareness to shorten it, has absolutely become that. And honestly, I don't know how I carried on without it. I'm so grateful for it. So that's what I'm going to be teaching today. So this is a mindful practice. This is about checking in all of the time of where we're feeling. And I wanted to start with that today. And I think this is important, you know, with any friendship, with any beginning conversation. And certainly we're about to go on a journey together, just to take a moment, just to check in with how we're feeling today so we can show up exactly as we are. And so I just want to take a moment to do that. And I'm just going to guide you slightly. So we're just going to, you know, the best way to check in with how we're feeling is through the breath. First of all, that helps just to clear out all of the different things we've done to get to this webinar today. We may have been at work, or we may have been really busy and usually rushing around. Maybe we've got something else going on in our body or in our lives. So taking that in first breath helps just to clear out a bit of space and come into the body. And what I recommend is thinking of just keeping this as simple as possible. Just 1, 2, or 3 words of just how you're feeling. Try and make it in, you know, relate it to a part of the body if you can. And you're very, very welcome to share it now. I'm hoping that Sophie's put it in. So you can share it in the chat box. Sometimes it's quite nice to share. You're not obliged to share at all. So let's just take that in breath now. We'll take a few more. Let's take 2 more. Just focusing on the breath. My mind is feeling a bit clearer. So I can bring the attention to my body. And I recommend you do the same. How am I feeling today? Mm, the words that are coming up for me here is quite heavy. I've got some cramping. So I think you can probably all relate to that heavy feeling. And I feel quite dreamy. I don't like using brain fog. Much prefer thinking of it being a dream state. And actually, having taken those breaths, I feel quite relaxed. So my 3 words there are going to be heavy, dreamy, and relaxed. If you have a pen and paper, you can write it down. And if no words are coming right now, an emoji is just so useful. So I really encourage an emoji too. And if you don't have a pen and paper with you, then just picture it in your mind. That's absolutely fine as well. I wonder if I can read these. Some of these. Don't think I can read them.
Would you like me to read some out for you, Kate?
Yeah, that would be lovely. Yeah, if you could read perhaps, yeah, if you could read a few out, that would be great. Thank you.
We've got someone who shared that they're feeling stressed, anxious, and tired. Someone who said that they're feeling sick, but they're feeling quite good today, actually. Someone shared that they feel clarity, awareness, and open. Someone says that they feel quite hopeful, which is nice. And someone shared they're tired, busy, but keen to learn about MCA.
Thank you. It's so empowering to hear where you're at and to hear those words. And And to go on a journey together, it's straight away we can understand, where this, how we can support one another too. And hopefully just to validate those feelings. We've all felt all of those feelings, if not this morning, on another day. And of course, our feelings change all of the time, but it's just so lovely to hear it. And I hope you feel empowered for sharing too. I'm going to move on, say thank you. So I mentioned about the compass. Obviously, we need to know how to use this particular compass, which I'm going to talk more about as we go through. But before we can go anywhere, we're going to need a map. Now, and here when I'm talking about mapping, of course, we're going on a journey in the menstrual cycle. So we need a map of the menstrual cycle. Now, one of the beautiful things that I learned here is that when I pictured the menstrual cycle and learning about the menstrual cycle, the thing that came up in my mind initially, this is before I encountered menstrual cycle awareness, was the diagram of the uterus. I vaguely remembered the diagram of the uterus from a biology lesson at school. And I vaguely remembered something about the shedding of the lining of the womb. That was kind of where I was at. And this is about 10 years ago, when I was 35, and I was, as I say, feeling completely lost with my menstrual cycle. And when I thought about it, that was the image that came up. And again, felt quite confused about that. What I've since learned is that the map is so incredibly simple. So if you have a pen and paper, I recommend drawing this out. Again, if you don't have a pen and paper, that's okay. You can just visualize it. Our map looks simply like this. It's just the menstrual cycle, just the circle. Now we can orientate ourselves in that circle with, at the bottom there, just putting a dot, and that there is day 1, the first day of our period. Now this is the map. And as I say, just because you have the map doesn't actually describe the journey and the experience you're going to have. But at least we've got a map so we know where we're going. And actually, this is looking quite straightforward. We're going to be moving around the circle and coming back at day 1. It doesn't actually matter how long your cycle is here or how short it is. But it's grounded again at day 1. So if you do have a long cycle, that's fine. Or if you have a short one, that's also fine. It's still this lovely circle. Of course, the lovely thing about the circle is that every single part of it is equal. And it's just a really important thing to remember, especially if we experience the menstrual cycle with challenges that can disrupt our lives. And yet every day is welcome and equal. I've put some arrows on there just to show which way we're going. That's quite helpful as well. So we're starting here down at the bottom on day 1, first day of our period. And we're moving around clockwise. We're going to be traveling up to the top and then down to the bottom. Okay, now we can draw a big cross. The menstrual cycle is divided into 4 seasons or phases. And each quadrant here represents a phase or a season, as I'm going to describe. Just check what I've got here. Right, okay. I'm going to come on to my completed one in a moment, and I'm going to move us around. Can you see my cursor, Sophie?
Yes, we can.
Great. Great. Okay, so here we are. We're all starting here, first day of our period. Now, I mentioned that I felt a bit lost when I was given the scientific information around the menstrual cycle. I am going to be sharing that today, but I want to share the really relatable language that was taught to me through Red School. Straight away, as soon as they described it, it was like a penny drop moment. And again, you may have heard this already, so it's good to hear it again if this is not new to you. So if we move from the first day, I'm actually going to move us up into this first phase of the menstrual cycle. This is similar and characteristic and tone to the spring of the year. So if you think back to being at primary school, or in fact, even earlier, this is preschool territory, we learn about the seasons so early on. Not only that, if we live in the Northern Hemisphere, we are embodying those seasons because, of course, we're living through them. So straight away, when we say spring, we definitely get a sense of what energy that holds. There's a kind of, in the early spring, which is down here, we've got newly formed buds. They're quite vulnerable to early frost, to late winter frost. We're growing here. There's a kind of a playfulness to spring. There's a new energy to it. There's certainly this youthful characteristic to it. So we're orientating ourselves here in the menstrual cycle. This is going to be the first week after the first day of our period. Now, I just have a little note here. The way I've just divided the menstrual cycle up into 4. Each of these represents a week, which would make this menstrual cycle that I've drawn out here 28 days. Now, we know that menstrual cycles are not as neat as that. Not every menstrual cycle, even if you have a regular cycle of bang on 28 days or 29 days every month, sometimes that in itself varies. And we know that, people have much longer cycles or much shorter cycles. For the sake of this map and this journey, we're going to make them equal. And as I say, what we then can do is orientate our own cycle onto this archetypal one. So we have this here, we're coming in. So this is a week after menstruation. This is the springtime of our cycle. So again, there's a kind of rising energy. And we've got 2 weeks after menstruation. This is the summer of our cycle. Again, what do we think of with the summer? We're thinking late nights, more energy. If we're looking at the stereotypical characteristics of summer, we're in full bloom here. There's all of the birds and the bees are out and the butterflies. There's like a vibrancy of life in this 2 weeks after this summer phase of the menstrual cycle. And then moving into the week before our period, this is the autumn of the cycle, starting to wind down, potentially lose some of that vibrancy as we approach the winter of our cycle. But also always say here, what does happen in autumn? Well, we know we can look outside our window. The sun does shine. It's cold here, but the sun, with a hint of winter in the air, but the sun does shine and we get the glorious colours. So it's certainly not all bad, is it, this autumn? I think this is often characterised, this phase, the premenstrual phase, as being the worst in the cycle for many. But in fact, let's just think about the autumn phase of it having all of those beautiful colours and the harvest, of course, the harvest from the rest of the seasons. And moving down then into this final week of menstruation, which is similar in tone to the winter of our cycle, where there may be a heaviness, where there may be a slower pace in our body and a drawing down. So what we've actually done there with our cycle in labeling the different phases with the seasons is we've also done a journey around the year, the 12 months of the year, around the 4 seasons. And one of the things I often say is when I'm teaching this, particularly to young people, is that the menstrual cycle, you can overlay so many cycles on top of the menstrual cycle. And what that does is remove some of the shame that perhaps comes along with teaching about the menstrual cycle. Really, it's so interconnected. We've just talked around the seasons. I'm going to come back to those again in a moment. But we could equally use this as a map around our life, couldn't we? With the spring of our life being, the youthful time. The summer, perhaps this is the phase where, it's often called the mother phase, but this doesn't necessarily relate to having any children, but more birthing projects, perhaps looking after a home, basically moving into full adulthood. We move around into the autumn of our life. Again, we're kind of starting to wind down. We're into retirement, and then further down then into the winter of our life here. This is the bit then we're starting to move into sort of our late 80s and 90s if we live a long life, really slowing down the pace. We could do the same with the lunar cycle, of course, with the day one being like the new moon, the dark moon in the sky, moving up to the quarter moon, up to the full moon in the summer of the lunar cycle, back down to the quarter moon in the autumn, and back round, and round it goes. I really love this. I love this idea of kind of overlaying the menstrual cycle onto the different cycles. I think it brings it up to the level of importance that it needs to hold in our own life and culturally too, that it's equivalent to the life cycle, it's equivalent to the lunar cycle. We could put the water cycle on here, we could put the carbon cycle on here too. I'm not going to do that, don't worry. So we've spoken through what I found with learning about the phases of the menstrual cycle, like the seasons, is that there was a relatability there for me straight away. And I could feel into being in my spring or in my summer or in my autumn and in my winter. And actually, I found when I was explaining that to my partner and my colleagues at work and my friends, I'm feeling really wintry. I'm feeling they got it straight away. And I didn't need to explain any more than that. I just want to explain to I think I'm going to come on to these crosses in a moment because there's a little bit more to say about those. I'm just going to show you my map with all of the labels on so that you've got them and it's a bit clearer. Here's one I drew earlier. I wanted to do it not on the screen so you could see. So I'm just going to orient us again around this. Here's my circle and my big crosses. Here's my day one at the bottom. Now, the phases of the menstrual cycle, if we're talking more in the terms that we're used to with the menstrual cycle, this first phase is known as pre-ovulation. The second phase is known as ovulation. The third phase, of course, is the premenstrual phase. And then the final phase there is the menstrual phase. And then you can see I've started to put the seasons on here. We've got spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Now I put the days on mine. Again, this is based on a 28-day cycle. So I would urge caution here with putting the days on because it varies from person to person. But what I would say is just like we can feel the shift between the phases outside, the shift between the seasons outside, we're starting to feel the winter approaching, or we feel the first leaves falling off the trees. You can definitely feel a shift as we move through these phases. And the secret is tuning in to those feelings so that and knowing the day of our cycle so we can start to record them and understand actually, wow, I did just feel a big shift. Wow, okay, yeah, I am in my autumn phase now. And the beauty of this is it's so subtle, but with this cycle awareness of tuning in every day to the day and the phase of our cycle and making a record of it, we can then start to see patterns in our own cycle and just shift in energy. And what does that really give us? Well, what do we need? Why do we bring the harvest in autumn? I've just been to my daughter's harvest festival, actually, but why do we do that in autumn? Well, we're preparing for our winter phase. And actually, cycle awareness, more than anything, is about preparing for what's ahead. So that if we have difficulty at ovulation, for example, in terms of pain around certain days, well, we can see them coming and we can start to prepare for those shift in energy and how we're feeling in our body. Usually that is by getting additional support for ourselves. Okay, I'm just going to go back here. So yeah, so if you know the day of your cycle, then great, fantastic, because this is really what we're looking for here, because the best way of doing this is to ground ourselves in the day of our cycle that we're on. Now, often what can happen is that we only really look at the days of our cycle during our period. Quite often we might be at day, day 9, day 10, day 20, and we're not recording it necessarily anymore like that. With cycle awareness, I would really urge you with this practice to be tuning in really every day to understand and keep track of what day we're at, because that's the one thing you can rely on, is what day of the cycle you are. You can fit which phase you feel, which season, that's what energy you're feeling, but really the grounding here is what day you are on, and actually that day you're on is really the compass on top of the map. So we know that day 1 is the first day of our period. So you might be able to count back now if you're not sure. If you really don't know what day you're on, then for the next exercise where we're going to check in, that's okay, don't worry. We can just kind of guess into our phase a little bit. That's all right as well. There's actually no wrong answer here, because ultimately we're looking at how we are feeling ourselves. We're giving the power and the trust back in ourselves and into our own body. And then we're giving ourselves a language where then we can share with others how we're feeling and the support that we need. Now, if you are taking a contraceptive pill, or you're on any hormonal contraceptive, and you might be wondering, well, I don't have a bleed, or have a breakthrough bleed. It's trickier to track your cycle, of course, but it's not impossible. So we do still feel, you probably notice, you still sort of feel like you're in a bit of a cycle. There are 2 different ways of doing this. If you have a breakthrough bleed, which is often the case with the contraceptive pill, then that breakthrough bleed, you can just class that as your day 1. So whichever day of the pill you're on, you'll know what day of your cycle is. This is not actually, what we're doing here is it's not actually scientific. So, really we're just trying to find an anchor point to orientate ourselves in the map of the whole menstrual cycle. Lots of people that I work with use the lunar cycle. If they don't have a cycle, or they're really not sure and they don't have a bleed, then they can use the lunar cycle. So again, day 1 is the new moon, and then the full moon comes around then to day 14. So I'm not entirely sure where the lunar cycle is at the moment. I'll check that in a moment. So if you're not sure of your day, but I do recommend, if you do want to practice this, it is very helpful. Just put the caveat in, it's not that useful when you go and see your doctor and you say that your lunar cycle day 1, because they're not going to know what you're talking about. But those that do track around the moon who don't have a bleed, I know all of them who've tried it say that it's incredibly grounding, and that they start to kind of feel the seasons and the phases around the moon, which is actually quite extraordinary when you think about it. But, this is about orientating ourselves with the cycles. So, okay, so now we are going to have another check-in. So we'll take a moment to have a think. We're going to have, again, we'll have 3 breaths just to check in. If you can share your day and the phase that you're in, please either use the season if you like that, or you can use the phase. And again, now think about those words that you use to describe how you're feeling, and see if you can just kind of link them into the phase that you're in. So grounding it there now in your actual menstrual cycle. What I'll do is while we're doing the check-in is just go back so that you can see the different phases. Okay, so we'll start now. Just taking 3 breaths. Okay, so I do know my day, and I'm day 25, and I am, apologies, that's my doorbell. This is the beauty of working from home with my children setting the doorbell. I'm going to ignore it. So I am day 25 today, and yeah, I am feeling like I'm crossing over into the winter. Actually, now that makes sense. I know I'm feeling really heavy. I know I'm slowing down. I know I've got that kind of brain fog, dream state feeling. So I'm day 25. I'm moving into the winter of my cycle. Sophie, would you like to share some of, if anybody else has shared, I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So we have someone who shared that they're on day 6, they're transitioning between winter and spring, and they feel it's probably the cause of their frenzied energy and their detachment as they're not quite in a season yet. Somebody has shared that they're in their winter season, they're feeling very tired and unmotivated, which I think is very similar to myself at my season. Someone shared that they're in day 13 in that ovulation time, where they've got pressure and cramping and nausea, but genuinely feeling in quite a good mood. Someone's on day 4 feeling wintry, feeling heavy and slow and wanting to hibernate. Somebody is in their spring phase of their cycle. She's starting to feel more connected to their body as they come closer to summer, but still feel a bit cold and achy from their period.
Wow, that is incredible self-awareness, isn't it? And knowledge to share with one another.
Yeah.
You know, I do find increasingly with this work with, you know, that what you've done there is exactly the practice of menstrual cycle awareness, of grounding yourself in your day, in your cycle, in your phase, and then how you're feeling. You know, it's what you're bringing to the day, and you know, voicing then too with all of us essentially your needs. You know, we can really tell from how you've described it, you know, how you're showing up. Such a beautiful, compassionate way of collaborating with one another on this journey, on the shared journey. And I do find increasingly as I've done menstrual cycle awareness that my day, I know just by saying the day really what that means to me. So and I've noticed that now I can also say to my partner, if I'm certainly day 1, of course, but you know, I can say to him, I'm day 16, and actually he now, he kind of understands what that means. That's a real drop in energy for me around the day 16. That's about halfway through the cycle, complete drop off of energy. So what happens is by sharing a day, one, it empowers every single day of the menstrual cycle, because we do have good days as well. So that when we do have a more challenging day, it's not all because of our bodies not doing what we want them to do. This, you know, there are layers and layers of suffering in there. There are days where, you know, we can also hold the menstrual cycle responsible for helping us feel in that way. And I love the kind of leveling effect of looking at the days around a circle. And the same way, you know, we look at the different seasons. We may have seasons, I mean, in the outer world now, the outer seasons, we may have seasons that we prefer to others, but you know, they have there's beauty in all of them, of course, and you know, really that's what we're trying to find here. We're trying to kind of be in the different days without the layers of suffering of I wish I could be in a different phase, or I wish I could feel differently. Because actually every time we wish that, we create a tension that and a stress that actually prevents us from really, from just encountering pain alone. For example, if we keep adding layers of suffering, it just intensifies pain, for example. Thank you so much for sharing. I really loved hearing all of those. If you're putting your hand up, by the way, I will definitely come to your questions at the end. So thank you for keeping them in mind. Okay. So recording the journey. I don't know if you can see these pop-ups, they keep coming up. So recording the journey. So the how and why of menstrual cycle tracking. So initially, I was sort of journaling a lot of these feelings, the 3 words of how I felt. And as I say, I think increasingly now over the years, I found that I don't need to, because actually I have got the awareness there of feeling. As long as I know the day, then I can relate it to my phase, but mainly how I feel in my body. And I'm recording it then for myself, really. More than anything, I'm recording it for myself. That said, that's over a decade of practicing this, and we know that recording it, like we've just shared it now, helps just for us to look to see where our patterns are. And I'm talking about not just the patterns of those kind of key hotspots, maybe around ovulation or the premenstruum or menstruation, but also, I noticed, for example, that around my day 9, I was getting a headache consistently every month. I never would have seen that. I never would have related that to my menstrual cycle if I hadn't been recording it. And I just find that really fascinating to kind of when you can start to see those kind of patterns. So what we're looking for here when we're recording is to start to see patterns in cycle after cycle. And even if you have an irregular cycle, you can actually start to see patterns. It's quite extraordinary, really, because we're tuning into how we're feeling in our body. This heavy feeling that I have today, for example, on day 25, actually, if I'm honest, I feel like I'm about to get my period. So I don't even really need to know that it's day 25. I just feel that heaviness. So, and we can feel into that. And I felt like a real intense frustration the last few days. And I just knew what I was experiencing, and I was trying to really hold the tension of my premenstrual phase. And in a way, if I, even if that happened after 20 days, I would still be able to feel those things. So if you have an irregular cycle, this is actually an even better practice to use, because you're really tuning in, and you start to notice, what are the things that I'm feeling are the indicators for my period coming, for example. Now, it's certainly harder to get maybe to prepare. But what you'll notice is you'll start seeing the symptoms. As I say, like I knew that my day 9 was like coming into the springtime was a headache. So, there are also indicators that aren't just like the pain that just, for example, for me precedes menstruation, but sometimes things that come kind of a week before, a week before those symptoms. So it's just really about finding out what is typical for you. And what are you experiencing? What's your normal? Now, if we record it, obviously, we can also start to see when things don't seem to be normal to us. And then it's so amazing, because we can actually, and this is key, evidence our experience. And unfortunately, we do have to advocate for ourselves with healthcare professionals. And if we can take in 3 months of cycle symptoms, as many of you will know because you'll be tracking and charting your cycle already, then it's going to help us get the support we need. If we need help at work, if you go in with 3 months of 3 months is usually the enough actually to evidence it, of the severe symptoms, for example, that we're feeling on similar days, then we can start to say, look, here it is. This is what I'm experiencing. I need support on these days, for example. So it's really helpful with employers. It's really helpful at school with tutors. It's really really, really useful with healthcare professionals because it should help to speed up those diagnosis times. So what form of recording do we use? So any form of recording our experience is valid. Okay, so you have to find the one that suits you the best. And now we know that this ranges from good old pen and paper. So for example, a journal where you have one page and you put day one, and then each day, day two, day three on each page, for example, and you go back each day one and you write those 3 words or an emoji, keep it as simple as possible. If you're a real journaler, then you might just be going for it and writing lots. That's fine. But here we're just like, we're looking for easy to access. So you make sure that you do it all of the time. So you might just do 1 page of a journal. That is evidence enough if you take it in and you need additional support. In the course, I would just say we list all of the different methods of tracking, and we also include different charts. Endometriosis UK supply a chart for looking for specific endometriosis symptoms. That's really, really useful. And actually the different menstrual health charities have the different ways of tracking different symptoms. They're all listed on the course. Then, of course, we have period tracking apps. And there are many, many different period tracking apps. They're a tool to help us make these notes. What period tracking apps don't do is help you embody your experience. And I do really feel that the tracking app is a tool to this practice to help you record it as you go along. So it's a bit like going out on our journey, if we continue that metaphor, with our journal or our tracking app, without an actual map. So it's really, really important to embody how we're feeling and then use it to record it. And then it's quite useful. Obviously, apps have their pros and cons. We do talk about that quite a lot in the course as well, so that you can choose, just choose the method that works for you. But tracking apps, of course, are amazing. An amazing, phenomenal modern tool. Anything that then sort of drops off, you can always try something else. And the beautiful thing with the menstrual cycle is we can always start again. If not tomorrow, we can start again in the next cycle. So, if something falls off, you can come back. I've actually, when I was tracking with pen and paper, if I'd just forgotten to do any recording, probably because I was actually okay, I'd just go back and just put a giant smiley emoji over sort of 4 days. Well, that tells us quite a lot, actually, because if we're getting a giant smiling emoji over 4 days for 3 cycles in a row, we're seeing that really, there's in that place, things are hunky-dory. If we're getting kind of a really angry or painful emoji, then, that's enough to show, okay, we need to, these are real hot spots and need support in this time. So again, I cannot stress enough, just keep it as simple as you can. And I found it very useful to do this first thing in the morning. Where am I in my cycle? And how am I feeling? And what phase I'm in? And I shared that straight away with someone. And actually, now I would share it throughout the day with lots of people. Each time we share it, we're removing menstrual stigma. Each time we share what day we're on and what phase we're in and how we're feeling, we are removing menstrual stigma. We are lifting the taboo, and we are enabling others to do the same and to meet us all where we're at. And as we found out right at the beginning, that sense of collaboration is really key. I think it's going to change the world, in fact. Okay, so I've got here to do another check-in, journaling. I feel like I'm feeling into this a little bit because we've done a check-in with the day and the phase. And I'm wondering if the best thing to do here would be to have a think about what would best suit you for journaling, and maybe set an intention here of when you're going to do it. And I think we should do it that way. And maybe if you have a pen and paper, Just write it down. Just write your intention of, for example, I'm going to check my period tracking app just to check what day I'm on, or I'm going to share this, what day I'm on, with my nearest and dearest. So just take a moment. I'd really love just to hear some of the intentions, or you might be setting an intention to start journaling. So yeah, let's just take those 3 breaths and then write down the intention. I think my intention there is to restart the my tracking, particularly because I'm noticing that I'm crossing over into perimenopause, and so things are shifting, and it's very useful to have a record of things as they were and then things as they are, because you can start to really feel into a difference. So that's my intention, renewed intention.
We've got a few coming in already. Would you like to hear some of them?
I'd love to, thank you.
So we've got someone who's shared that they now intend to start their day by checking in and beginning their tracking journal. Someone shared that they're going to buy a diary to start journaling every day, even if it's just with an emoji. Someone says that they're going to continue tracking with the app they're using, but to become more self-aware and more confident in themselves using it. And someone said that they're going to start journaling and that they're going to treat themselves to a paper diary, which is lovely.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing those. Yeah, I think it's interesting with the period tracking app that sometimes we're outsourcing how we're feeling to the app, as though we don't need to think about it because it's gone onto the app. So that's why I would, really, to embody the practice and then use it as the tool it is to then keeping that record. But often not outsourcing it, because we don't need to have the app. This is something that the marketing is doing, isn't it? And that we need all of these things somehow in order to experience our menstrual cycle. And of course we don't. we don't need to have a period tracking app. It's okay if we don't have it, and a pen and paper is just as good. One of the things we have on our course for those who are set the intention to get a paper journal, which is a really lovely way of doing it. We also have a template of a big circle with different segments for every day, very small segments, and then you can put the days on it, and then you can put your emojis in there. And then you can have, so in your journal as well, then you can have those stuck in. And, again, it's a very different way. We're very used to being given charts and plotting and symptoms. This is a very simple way, actually, of collecting evidence for a healthcare professional, but most importantly, doing it for ourselves. So that's called a circle chart. And actually, if you type circle chart into Google, there are lots of places that you can download it for free. So if that does sound appealing, have a look. Obviously, if you have a long cycle, you want to be finding one that has got enough segments in it. Often they can go up to 45. I've seen one with 45. On our course, we've got one up to 35. Okay. Okay, so I've come back to our map. This time I have drawn a big long line down the center, in addition to the crosses. So if you've got one with a cross, just put this long line down it now. So, you know, the menstrual cycle is it's a cycle of two halves, isn't it? It's a sort of a rise and then a decline. And that's true if we were talking about hormones. Again, I will talk about that in just a moment. But there's a definite sense of there being two sides of this cycle. You may notice at the peak, as I mentioned, just after ovulation, for me, there is almost always a real lag. And actually, often because it falls mid-cycle, and a following sort of, if I've had ovulation pain, it follows that, and I've just got just nothing. I feel just so exhausted. And because it's mid-cycle, it still can confuse me even now of like, well, oh, why do I feel this way? But actually there is a bit of it's kind of it's a very subtle change as we move into the second half, sorry, of the cycle. So just to use the medical terms here, that first half of the cycle where we're moving up from day one, where's my cursor gone? Oh, there, like I've got some arrows, great. As we're moving up from day one, that first half of the cycle is called the follicular phase, and the second half of the cycle is called the luteal phase. Sometimes that gets a bit confused on TikTok when people talk about the 4 phases. We talked about the different seasons. Sometimes people call the springtime the follicular phase, and the autumn time the luteal phase. In effect, clinically, because these are the clinical words, follicular and luteal describe the two halves of the cycle. I want to share that because it's important that we also have that knowledge between us. But certainly there's a kind of rise in energy and then a sort of a decline in a way, a drawing down, just in the same way we would have with autumn, then through to winter, or in the life cycle of the aging process of the growth. And the growth, psychologically speaking, into the autumn of our life, and the winter of our life. But of course, physically speaking, we're getting older. Now, do I have... Yes, good. Okay, so I put the crosses back in. I wanted to talk, I noticed actually some of you mentioned this, which is super astute when you were doing your check-in with the day and the phase. You talked about transitioning. I talked about transitioning. I said I was day 25. I feel I'm moving into winter. These are what we call crossover days. We know this in the outer seasons. We know that we don't just go bam from spring to summer. We don't just go bam from autumn to winter. It's actually several weeks of different changes that we can notice. And I really recommend now just really taking note when you start to see changing seasons. And with these changes, these transition days, we do get a kind of a bit of a bump in the road. And so to really watch out for those crossover days. I've just noticed the time. So I'm just going to move here. So that was the check-in. So what day am I? What phase am I? How am I feeling? What's coming next in my cycle? And what support do I need? And as I say, a new journey begins with every breath, every phase, every cycle, every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. I'm going to quickly post a poll where people can submit any questions that they do have. I am quite conscious of the time, so if you're okay, Kate, maybe staying on, and those who can stay on, of course, for another maybe 5 minutes just to answer a few questions that come in.
Yes, I'm so sorry
no,
that I've run over that.
It was so fascinating. Please don't worry. And for anyone who does have any questions but might need to rush off, we will send out an email where you can submit your questions too. Yeah. So please don't worry. I'll just have a look at one of our pre-submitted questions that they've shared. So we actually had a question from a teacher and asked, is this course something that we can implement in our PSHE lessons for when they teach about menstrual health?
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine being taught this as the basics of the menstrual cycle. this is the basics of the menstrual cycle. And I said I was going to go back and sort of talk through the science, which we haven't had time to do. And that is all in the course, but I've related it to the circle. So if you are interested in how the hormones work, you can have a look there. The course is free for young people. So you can also refer your young people to it, or you can do it in the lesson if you have computers, or you can set it. There are 4 10-minute modules. So yeah, you can absolutely use it. And if you feel inspired to teach it in this way with the circle and the phases, I really encourage you to do so.
Yeah. We have someone submitted a live question here asking, how do they track via the lunar cycle, as they've had the coil and they don't always bleed with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. Have a look. You can just Google today, what's the lunar cycle, and it will tell you where the moon is. The key parts to note: when is the full moon going to be, and then when is the new moon going to be, and then you can treat your new moon like your day one. What that enables you to do is to start to feel into, if you're like, so it gives you a grounding in a cycle. And you can track it that way then as well. And it's quite fun to do it that way, and to see, where are you feeling the seasons, and just see what happens. It just enables you. It's giving you the gift of having a cycle. We all have that lunar cycle that we can be living by.
Brilliant. We have a pre-submitted question from someone who asks, what do I do if my cycle varies a lot? Sometimes I have a period every 3 weeks or every 5 weeks. It just feels like the days are always different.
Yeah, so I think we answered that there, that you know your body best. By tracking it, you can feel into it, and you actually might find that you can see your cyclical patterns, and you'll start to even predict when you're going to bleed. And yeah, just give it a go. Sometimes even in the way of just coming into this practice, it can actually even help to regulate your cycle. That's anecdotal, by the way, but I have had that feedback from people. So you just try into it. Don't, your cycle is yours, and there's no, irregular cycle is not even the right word for it, really, is it? It's just because it doesn't mean for any reason that it's not normal. Of course, it's just, it works for you. So give it a try.
Brilliant. We had a pre-submitted question from somebody asking, how could I approach my workplace about cycle tracking, as they've been reading your website and think it would be really great to involve in their workplace?
Yes, as I say, if you know your day and you can bring that to the table and encourage others to do it, then it removes menstrual stigma in the workplace, and then you can support one another. So the course for adults is available. That's also free. So you could encourage your colleagues to do it. If you have an HR person or team, you could say this course is available. We could be referring people with a menstrual cycle to it, and then just start. You can start using it. And if we're ideally, we're working around people's when they show up, when they're, certainly if there's pain involved, not like loading lots of work on their desk on a day where it's actually going to be quite tricky or challenging to work. So
Brilliant. And our final question I think we have time for, thank you for staying on a bit longer there, Kate, is that there's lots of information on social media about your cycle, which obviously you mentioned within your presentation. But this person's asking if there are any sort of books or any places where they can go for more information that you might be able to recommend to them.
I'd say to that question that the person to trust the most is yourself. And I'm hoping that what this does is it brings out the opportunity to really understand where you're feeling. And actually, we don't need a GCSE biology award to understand ourselves.
Yeah.
We really don't. It's been outsourced far too long, our own experience. And so we can evidence how we're feeling. We can see. And so I would say that first and foremost. I mentioned Red School. They have a book. I really love Maisie Hill's book, Period Power, because it takes the teachings of the seasons, and then it gives it more scientific reference. So the Red School book, Wild Power, doesn't have any science in it. So Maisie Hill gives it that extra bit of science. You know, TikTok is awash with people really describing their own experiences too, and telling people how they should feel. And that's also a danger of saying, oh, spring, you're going to feel like this, summer, like, no, it's just the map. It doesn't tell us what our experience is going to be. It's the map and the compass. So yeah, trust yourself first and foremost.
Brilliant. Well, I think we'll end on that lovely note. I just want to say a huge thank you so much, Kate, for today's webinar on endometriosis and mindful practical cycle awareness.